When everything seemed lost, when silence spoke louder than love, God saw it. He saw what no one else noticed. He saw the tears you wiped away before anyone could ask why your eyes were red. He heard the prayers you whispered under your breath because saying them out loud felt too painful. He felt the weight of your shattered heart when the world kept moving as if nothing sacred had been broken. Heaven was not absent in that season, it was watching closely. There are moments in life when love does not end loudly. There is no dramatic goodbye, no final argument that gives closure. Instead, there is silence. Messages stop coming, conversations grow cold, affection fades without explanation, and silence, more than words, becomes the loudest sound in your soul. Silence has a way of making you question everything, your worth, your discernment, even your prayers. But what you didn't realize then is that silence was not proof of abandonment by God. It was the space where God was working unseen. God saw the night you stared at the ceiling, replaying memories and wondering where everything went wrong. He saw the moments you blamed yourself for things that were never yours to carry. He saw how you still prayed for that person even when your own heart was bleeding. He saw how love did not die in you, it was wounded, but still alive. And today, God speaks clearly, without confusion, without delay, I am restoring what the enemy stole from this love. This is not poetic language. This is spiritual truth, because what you went through was not just a breakup. It was not merely a misunderstanding, a season of distance, or bad timing. There was a spiritual war happening beneath the surface. The enemy does not attack random connections. He attacks divine purpose. He targets relationships that carry destiny, growth, healing, and calling. When two hearts are aligned not just emotionally, but spiritually, opposition is inevitable. The enemy works subtly. He does not always destroy with obvious chaos. Sometimes he uses doubt, sometimes distraction, sometimes pride disguised as self-protection, sometimes fear disguised as logic. He plants thoughts like, maybe this isn't worth fighting for, or, maybe God has someone else, or, maybe love is supposed to hurt less than this. And slowly, what God was building gets interrupted, not because God failed, but because spiritual battles require spiritual awareness. You felt it, didn't you? Deep down, something in your spirit knew this was bigger than emotions. Bigger than personality differences, bigger than circumstances. There was an unexplainable heaviness, confusion, resistance, as if something invisible was pushing you apart. That feeling was not imagination. It was discernment. And if you are feeling stirred right now, as if these words are speaking directly to your story, this message is not random. It is a sign from heaven. God does not restore randomly. He restores intentionally. When God says he is restoring what the enemy stole, he is not only talking about the relationship itself. He is talking about everything that was damaged along the way: trust, peace, hope, confidence, and faith in love. The enemy didn't just try to separate two people, he tried to convince you that love rooted in God is fragile. But God is now reversing that lie. Restoration does not always begin with reunion. It begins with revelation. The first sign of restoration is clarity. Confusion starts to lift. You begin to see things differently, not through pain, but through truth. You stop romanticizing the hurt, and you stop condemning yourself. You recognize patterns you couldn't see before. You understand what was spiritual interference and what was human weakness. And instead of bitterness, you feel understanding. That clarity is not emotional maturity alone, it is spiritual healing. The second sign of restoration is peace returning where anxiety once lived. Not the peace that comes from forgetting, but the peace that comes from trusting God again. You may still miss the person. You may still feel tenderness when their name crosses your mind. But the panic is gone. The desperation fades. You are no longer begging God to fix things, you are trusting him to do what is right. That shift is powerful. It means your heart is no longer controlled by fear. Another sign is the return of hope, quiet, steady hope. Not fantasy, not obsession, but a deep knowing that God is not finished with your story. Hope begins to whisper, what was broken can be rebuilt, and what was stolen can be returned, purified, refined, and stronger. You may notice yourself smiling again without guilt, dreaming again without pain. That is not you moving on in the worldly sense. That is you being restored. Sometimes restoration includes reconciliation, sometimes it includes redirection, but make no mistake, when God restores, nothing is wasted. Even the separation, the silence, the tears were used to strip away illusions and expose foundations. God does not rebuild on unstable ground. He removes what cannot last so that what is eternal can stand. You may be wondering, if God is restoring, why does it still feel slow? Because restoration in the kingdom is not rushed, it is aligned. God restores at the moment when both hearts are ready, when pride has softened, when wounds have been acknowledged, when lessons have been learned. Premature restoration would only recreate the same pain. God is not interested in repeating cycles. He is interested in redemption. Another sign of restoration is when prayer changes. You stop praying from desperation and start praying from surrender. Your prayers become less about controlling outcomes and more about alignment with God's will. You begin to say, Lord, do what protects purpose, even if it challenges my comfort. That prayer terrifies the enemy, because it means you trust God more than fear. You may also notice spiritual resistance increasing just before restoration manifests. Old memories resurface. Doubt tries to return. People give opinions that shake your confidence. That is not regression, it is confirmation. The enemy always makes noise when he is losing ground. Do not misinterpret spiritual resistance as God's silence. Heaven is active, even when it feels quiet. Remember this: what is meant by God cannot be destroyed, only delayed. If this love was truly rooted in divine purpose, it will not end in confusion. God is not the author of chaos. He brings resolution, whether through restoration together or restoration apart, but always with peace. And peace is the ultimate evidence of God's hand. You are not foolish for loving deeply. You are not weak for believing in restoration. You are not behind because you had to heal. Heaven honors hearts that remain tender in a hard world. Today, God is reminding you, He saw it all. He never looked away. He never minimized your pain. And He is not done. The signs have already begun: clarity, peace, hope, spiritual awakening. The question is not whether God is restoring. The question is whether you can recognize His movement beyond your expectations. Trust this: what the enemy tried to use to break you, God is using to prepare you. What was stolen is being returned, not the same, but transformed. And when restoration fully manifests, you will look back and realize that even the silence had a purpose. Because love guarded by God does not die. It waits, it heals, and when the time is right, it rises again. And as it rises, it does not rise fragile or unsure. It rises with wisdom etched into its foundation, with humility woven into its strength, and with discernment guarding its boundaries. What comes back from God's hands is never naive love, it is sanctified love. Love that has been through fire and did not burn away, only burned brighter. There was a version of you before the breaking who loved without filters, without armor, without full understanding. That version of you was sincere, but it was untested. God allowed the shaking not to punish you, but to refine you. Because the love He is restoring now requires a heart that can carry weight, responsibility, patience, truth, and timing. And you are becoming that heart. One of the hardest truths to accept is that sometimes God allows separation to save what matters most. When emotions run ahead of obedience, when attachment overshadows alignment, distance becomes mercy. It feels cruel in the moment, but it is protection in disguise. God saw what you could not see, what would have broken you permanently if it continued unchanged. And still, even in separation, God never severed purpose. You may have noticed that despite everything, the connection never truly died. You tried to move on, yet something kept pulling your spirit back, not in obsession, but in unresolved knowing. You prayed for release, yet peace would not come with forgetting. That is because some connections are not emotional accidents. They are assignments. And assignments are not cancelled by hardship, they are clarified by it. Another sign that restoration is unfolding is the inner strengthening you are experiencing. You are no longer begging to be chosen. You are no longer shrinking yourself to be loved. You are no longer willing to accept partial presence or conditional affection. This is not bitterness, it is maturity. God is teaching you that restored love must be mutual, intentional, and anchored in truth. You are also learning to hear God's voice above your emotions. Before, feelings dictated decisions. Now, discernment leads. You pause before reacting. You pray before responding. You wait before assuming. This shift is crucial. The enemy thrives in impulsivity, but God moves in wisdom. Every time you choose wisdom over emotion, you reclaim territory the enemy once occupied. Do not underestimate the power of this season of waiting. Waiting is not an activity in the kingdom, it is preparation. While you wait, God is working on hearts, circumstances, timing, and understanding. He is aligning what seemed impossible to align before. He is dismantling pride, healing wounds that were hidden, and teaching lessons that could not be learned any other way. There are things God is addressing in the other person's heart as well, things you cannot fix, confront, or accelerate. True restoration cannot happen if only one heart is healed. And God is far more committed to wholeness than speed. He will take the time necessary to ensure that when paths cross again, if they do, they cross in truth, not illusion. You may have asked God, why did this have to hurt so much? Because shallow love never produces deep purpose. Pain exposes what comfort hides. It reveals motives, attachments, fears, and idols. Through the pain, God showed you where you placed your identity, where you compromised your boundaries, where you relied more on human affection than divine assurance. This was not condemnation, it was correction wrapped in mercy. And now, something holy is happening inside you. You are no longer desperate for outcomes. You are grounded in trust. You are learning that God's silence is not absence, it is intention. He speaks most clearly to hearts that are still enough to listen. And your heart is becoming still, not empty, but anchored. Another sign of restoration is gratitude returning. You begin to thank God not only for what is coming, but for what He protected you from. You see that not everything you lost was meant to stay. Some things were removed because they could not survive where God is taking you. Gratitude signals healing because bitterness cannot coexist with thanksgiving. Be careful not to rush God's process by forcing conclusions. Restoration does not always look like a dramatic reunion or a sudden message. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, through changed perspectives, softened hearts, unexpected conversations, or divine timing that cannot be replicated by human effort. When God restores, it happens naturally, without manipulation, without fear, without striving. If reunion is part of God's plan, it will come with clarity, accountability, and mutual growth. It will not come with confusion, secrecy, or imbalance. Restored love reflects God's character. It brings peace, not anxiety, security, not fear, unity, not control. And if God restores you without restoring the relationship, understand this, you still won. Because the greatest restoration is not always relational, it is personal. God restoring your identity, your faith, your joy, your confidence, and your capacity to love again is victory beyond measure. No enemy can steal what God rebuilds within you. Do not let the enemy whisper that the waiting means nothing is happening. That lie has delayed many destinies. Heaven does not rush, but it never wastes time. Every day you are becoming someone who can sustain what you once prayed for. You are learning to love without losing yourself, to hope without idolizing outcomes, to trust without surrendering discernment. This is restoration at work. Stay attentive to the signs, but do not become obsessed with them. Signs are confirmations, not substitutes for faith. Keep your heart aligned, your spirit sensitive, and your hands open. God fills open hands, not clenched fists. And when restoration fully arrives, in whatever form God deems best, you will recognize it not by excitement alone, but by peace. Deep, unshakable peace. The kind that settles your spirit and confirms, without words, this is from God. Until then, keep walking. Keep trusting. Keep healing. What was attacked because of purpose will be restored with purpose. What was stolen will return refined. And what was broken will testify, not of defeat, but of divine redemption. And redemption always carries memory, but it no longer carries chains. You will remember what happened, but it will not control you. You will remember the pain, but it will not define you. This is how you know healing has taken root, when the past becomes a teacher instead of a prison. There was a time when every reminder felt like reopening a wound. A song, a place, a date on the calendar could pull you back into grief without warning. But now, something subtle is changing. The memories still come, yet they arrive softer. They no longer demand tears. They simply pass through, acknowledged, understood, released. This is not emotional numbness. This is strength. God is teaching you that love does not need to be erased to be redeemed. Some love is transformed, not removed. It changes shape. It moves from attachment to understanding, from longing to surrender. And surrender is not giving up, it is placing trust where it belongs. Another quiet sign of restoration is how you speak about the past. You are no longer trying to convince others of your pain. You no longer rehearse the story to justify yourself. You no longer need validation for what you endured. When the need to explain disappears, healing has matured. God has affirmed you internally, so external approval loses its power. You may also notice that your discernment has sharpened. You sense, intentions faster. You recognize misalignment earlier. You feel a spiritual pause before entering connections that once would have excited you. This is not fear, it is wisdom. God restores not only what was taken, but also what was missing. He is giving you insight that protects future purpose. And with that insight comes a deeper compassion. You understand now that broken people break things, often without intending to. You see how unhealed wounds spill into relationships. This understanding does not excuse harm, but it frees you from hatred. Forgiveness stops being a command you struggle to obey and becomes a release you choose for your own peace. Forgiveness does not mean access. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Forgiveness means the enemy no longer has permission to use resentment as a foothold in your heart. As this freedom grows, God begins to reawaken parts of you that went silent during the pain. Creativity returns. Laughter feels natural again. Prayer feels intimate instead of forced. Worship feels honest, even when it's quiet. You are no longer performing faith, you are living it. This is important to understand. Restored people love differently. They do not rush intimacy. They do not confuse attention with affection. They do not ignore red flags in the name of hope. They do not abandon themselves to keep someone else comfortable. They have learned that love should feel safe, not destabilizing. If God brings someone back into your life, whether the same person or someone new, you will notice the difference immediately. There will be consistency instead of confusion, presence instead of excuses, mutual effort instead of imbalance, and most importantly, alignment instead of anxiety. God does not restore you just to return you to the same patterns. He restores you to elevate you. That elevation often feels lonely at first. Fewer people have access to you now. Not because you became cold, but because you became intentional. You value peace too much to negotiate it away. You value truth too deeply to entertain confusion. This narrowing of access is not loss, it is protection. You may still wrestle with moments of impatience. There will be days when you wonder if you imagined God's promise, if you misunderstood His voice, if hope has made you vulnerable again. In those moments, remember this: God does not tease hearts He intends to heal. He does not awaken hope just to abandon it. What He begins, He completes, even when the timeline stretches beyond your comfort. Sometimes restoration looks like delay because God is protecting you from receiving something before you can steward it well. Timing is not punishment, it is mercy. What arrives too early can damage what is meant to last. There is also a deeper work happening, one that goes beyond romance, relationships, or reunion. God is restoring your sense of belonging to Him. Pain has a way of reordering priorities. It strips away illusions of control and self-sufficiency. It pushes you back to the source, not out of fear, but out of truth. You are learning to sit with God without asking for immediate answers. To trust Him even when outcomes remain unseen. To believe His character when circumstances feel contradictory. This level of faith cannot be taught, it must be lived. And this faith changes how you wait. Waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels purposeful. You are not standing still, you are becoming. You are being strengthened in ways that will matter later, even if you don't fully understand how yet. Heaven sees the full picture. You see only the frame you are standing in. One day, you will look back at this season and realize it was a turning point, not because everything went wrong, but because everything real began. You stopped chasing validation. You stopped negotiating your worth. You stopped confusing intensity with intimacy. And in that stopping, God started something new. Restoration does not erase the fact that you were hurt. It redeems the fact that you survived with your heart still capable of love. Do not fear loving again. Fear closing your heart so tightly that nothing new can enter. God did not heal you to isolate you, He healed you to prepare you. Prepared hearts recognize healthy love without forcing it. And remember this: not every door that closed was slammed by the enemy. Some were gently shut by God's own hand. He closes doors you would have stayed at too long. He removes people you would have kept trying to fix. He interrupts paths that would have exhausted you. This, too, is restoration. As you move forward, let peace be your confirmation. If something requires constant anxiety to maintain, it is not from God. If something pulls you away from your values, your growth, your faith, it is not restoration, it is repetition. God restores in a way that honors who you are becoming, not who you used to be. So walk gently with your heart. Guard it without hardening it. Trust God without demanding explanations. What you lost did not defeat you. What broke did not define you. What was stolen did not disappear, it is being returned in a form that can no longer be destroyed. And when you finally stand in the fullness of what God has restored, whether in love, identity, or purpose, you will understand why it had to happen this way. Why silence spoke, why waiting mattered, why healing took time. Because some restorations are so sacred, God refuses to rush them. And in that sacred slowness, something eternal is being anchored inside you. God is not only restoring what was taken, He is fortifying what will remain. What He is building now is not dependent on circumstances, people, or seasons. It is rooted in truth. And truth does not collapse when storms return. There was a season when your faith was intertwined with outcomes. When prayers felt unanswered, your confidence wavered. When love broke, your trust in God felt fragile. But now your faith is being recentered. It is no longer based on what God does for you, but on who God is. This is the kind of faith that endures silence without panic and delay without despair. You are learning that God's presence is not proven by constant reassurance, but by steady guidance. Even when you felt lost, you were never abandoned. Even when you doubted, you were still held. Even when you couldn't hear Him, He was leading you quietly, step by step, away from what would have destroyed you and toward what will sustain you. Another sign of restoration is the way your identity is settling. You are no longer defined by who stayed or who left. You are no longer measuring your worth by someone else's capacity to love you well. You are rediscovering yourself as someone chosen, seen, and valued by God, independently of any relationship. This independence is not isolation, it is stability. Stable people do not beg to be understood. Stable people do not chase closure. Stable people do not confuse intensity with destiny. And stability is one of the greatest gifts God can restore. You may notice that your emotional reactions are no longer extreme. What once would have shattered you now only challenges you. What once would have consumed your thoughts now passes through your awareness without taking residence. This does not mean you care less, it means you are stronger. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I trust God with this," and moves forward anyway. There is also a purification happening in your desires. You are no longer asking God for love at any cost. You are asking Him for love that honors Him, respects you, and nurtures growth. This refinement is evidence of healing. Desperation fades when identity is restored. God is also teaching you the difference between attachment and covenant. Attachment seeks comfort. Covenant seeks commitment. Attachment clings out of fear of loss. Covenant stands firm out of mutual devotion. What God restores in your life will not be fragile attachment, it will be covenantal in nature, whether with people, purpose, or calling. This is why the enemy fought so hard. The enemy does not fear broken hearts. He fears healed hearts with discernment. He fears people who love deeply without losing themselves. He fears those who trust God enough not to rush, not to settle, not to compromise truth for temporary relief. And that is who you are becoming. Do not be surprised if old temptations return, the temptation to settle, to reconnect prematurely, to fill the quiet with noise. Growth is always tested, but every time you choose patience over impulse, you reinforce the restoration God is building within you. You are also beginning to understand that not every unanswered question needs resolution. Some things will never make sense on a human level, and that is okay. Closure does not always come from explanations, it often comes from acceptance. Acceptance that God saw everything. Acceptance that God intervened. Acceptance that what happened was allowed, but not pointless. Purpose is often revealed in hindsight. One day, you will recognize how this season prepared you to love with wisdom, led with humility, and serve with compassion. You will see how the pain expanded your capacity to understand others, to hold space without judgment, to offer grace without enabling harm. These qualities cannot be learned in comfort, they are forged in adversity. Restoration also teaches you to trust your intuition again. Pain can make you doubt your instincts, wondering how you missed the signs. But God is gently restoring your confidence in your discernment. You are learning that intuition clouded by attachment is not the same as intuition refined by surrender. Now, your inner voice is clearer, steadier, anchored in peace rather than fear. As this clarity grows, you become less reactive to uncertainty. You no longer interpret delays as rejection or silence as abandonment. You understand that God's timing operates beyond urgency. He is not late, He is precise, and precision often feels uncomfortable because it removes control. You are learning to release control without releasing hope. This balance is rare, and it is powerful. Hope without control trusts God to choose the how, the when, and the who. It believes that what is meant for you will not require manipulation to maintain. This is why you are being asked to remain still in moments when you want to act. Stillness is not passivity, it is trust in motion. It is saying, I will not interfere with what God is aligning. Another mark of restoration is joy returning without a specific reason. You laugh and realize no thought triggered it. You feel lightness without explanation. This joy is not dependent on circumstances, it is the fruit of inner healing. It is evidence that God is replenishing what grief depleted. And grief did deplete you. It drained your energy, your optimism, your sense of safety. It made you cautious, guarded, tired. God is aware of that exhaustion. Restoration includes rest. Deep, soul-level rest. The kind that does not come from sleep alone, but from trust restored. God is inviting you to rest in Him again, not as a concept, but as a refuge. As you continue forward, remember this: restoration does not mean everything will look like it once did. It means everything will function better than before. Stronger boundaries, clearer communication, healthier expectations, deeper alignment. If love returns, it will return differently. If purpose unfolds, it will unfold sustainably. If joy increases, it will be rooted, not fleeting. You are not waiting for life to begin again. It already has. This season is not an intermission, it is a foundation. What God builds on this foundation will not collapse under pressure, because it is anchored in truth, patience, and surrender. So keep listening, keep trusting, keep choosing peace over panic. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not rebuilding alone. He who saw your tears is restoring your strength. He who heard your silent prayers is aligning your future. And he who allowed the breaking is ensuring the restoration will last. Because when God restores, He does not simply return what was lost. He redeems it, secures it, and protects it from being stolen again.